Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Europe tonight, hoping to build trade and defense cooperation with key allies. Canada has pivoted across the pond as tensions simmer with our southern neighbor.
The relationship between the United States and Canada has rarely felt so unsettled. President Donald Trump has used tariffs as his favorite instrument of pressure, reshaping the way America interacts with its closest neighbors. In Washington, the tone has been sharp, focused on extracting concessions through surprise measures and tough rhetoric. North of the border, Prime Minister Mark Carney has taken a different path. Rather than respond with fire against fire, he is building a strategy centered on patience, alliances, and long-term leverage. The question facing both countries is not just about tariffs today. It is about whether Canada can hold its ground while reshaping its future beyond America's shadow.
Prime Minister Carney announcing yesterday that Canada will be dropping some countermeasures on American goods.
In terms of the strategy here, it's probably a smart play for Canada to really underscore the importance and the value of CUSMA.
Carney's most recent move was to scale back many of Canada's retaliatory tariffs on American goods. The change will be visible on supermarket shelves, where Canadian families may see lower prices on everyday products like fruit juice and food staples. Canadian manufacturers that rely on U.S. components will also feel some relief. On the surface, this might look like a concession, but in reality, it is a deliberate gesture designed to highlight the value of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. Roughly 85 to 90% of Canadian exports to the United States already travel tariff-free under that pact. By removing countermeasures on CUSMA-covered goods, Carney is showing that Canada respects the deal and expects Washington to do the same.
So as we work to address outstanding trade issues with the United States, it's important, it's vital. We do everything we can to preserve this unique advantage for Canadian workers, Canadian businesses.
The real sticking points remain in metals and autos. The United States continues to apply tariffs of up to 50% on steel, aluminum, and copper, citing national security provisions. Canada has kept some retaliatory measures in place on those products. This mix of relief and resistance is intentional. It demonstrates goodwill without abandoning leverage, and it signals that Canada is ready to negotiate seriously on the areas that matter most. Instead of bending, Carney is pacing the talks and ensuring that Canada sets terms of engagement rather than reacting blindly to every move from Washington.
As the trade war with the United States continues, Carney has been focused on diversifying trade, especially with Europe. Canada's energy and critical minerals are top of the pitch list.
Carney's approach is not limited to North America. While discussions with the Trump administration continue, he has crossed the Atlantic to strengthen ties with Europe. His itinerary includes meetings with leaders in Germany, Poland, and Latvia, alongside sessions with major business executives. Canada's pitch is clear. It can be a reliable supplier of energy and critical minerals at a time when European governments are anxious about secure supply chains. This European push comes at a sensitive moment. The European Union only recently accepted a tariff framework with the United States that set a 15% baseline on many goods, while higher duties remained on steel and aluminum. Canada is watching that experience closely. By stepping in with offers of energy, minerals, and defense cooperation, Ottawa is positioning itself as an attractive partner, just as Europe seeks alternatives to U.S. pressure. The presence of Canadian troops in Poland and Latvia under Operation Reassurance also reinforces Canada's credibility as both a security and economic partner. What might look like a simple trade mission is in fact a statement of independence. Canada is diversifying its options and making clear that it will not be cornered. The contrast between Washington and Ottawa is clear. Trump thrives on confrontation, using tariffs to unsettle allies. His method creates urgency and seeks fast concessions. Carney is shaping a slower game. He lowers costs at home, keeps leverage, and builds partnerships abroad. The strategy may not grab headlines like Trump's moves, but it builds resilience. For Canada, this is not about bowing to American power. It is about proving that a middle power with the right resources and alliances can withstand turbulence and turn it into strength. The coming months will test both leaders. Trump will push through tariffs and deadlines. Carney will counter with alliances and economic cards. Canada is not reacting anymore. It is standing tall, steering its own path, and reminding the world its choices matter.
We're going to be putting a very large tariff on chips and semiconductors. If you're building in the United States or have committed to build, without question committed to build in the United States, there will be no charge.
In the days after August 1st, the trade battle between Washington and its key partners took an unexpected turn. President Donald Trump pushed forward with one of his most aggressive proposals yet: a 100% tariff on imported computer chips and semiconductors. His message was blunt: build in the United States or pay double. This was more than a new trade policy. It was a move that sent tremors through global supply chains, rattled the markets, and left allies like Canada watching closely. Chips aren't just inside laptops. They're in cars, refrigerators, and the everyday devices people rely on. A shock at the source means higher prices across the board.
President Trump and Apple CEO Tim Cook just announced a new $100 billion commitment to manufacturing in the U.S.
The reality is that Apple invests billions per year already in the U.S., right?
And while Cook didn't announce the Made in USA iPhone that Trump maybe wanted, he did flatter Trump by giving him a customized plaque with a 24-karat gold base, of course.
Trump staged the chip tariff rollout with Apple's $100 billion U.S. investment as the showcase, while pressuring Intel's CEO and signaling that political alignment mattered as much as business. Many such investments were already planned, making the tariff more a political bargaining chip than a genuine industrial policy. On paper, the plan was about bringing money and jobs back to America. In practice, the economics tell a more complicated story. Independent studies, including the Yale Budget Lab's August 2025 review, estimate that tariffs implemented this year could raise household costs by $2,200 to $3,800 annually. That's because tariffs don't stay on corporate balance sheets. They show up in the final price tag for consumers. And while Trump points to corporate investments as proof of success, many of these projects predate the tariff. Apple's $100 billion pledge, Samsung's Arizona expansion, TSMC's multi-billion-dollar fabs, all were in motion thanks to the 2022 CHIPS Act and the AI-driven race for capacity. The tariff may have reinforced these moves, but it didn't create them. There's also the jobs question. Modern semiconductor fabrication is highly automated. Even with new facilities, the number of direct manufacturing jobs created is limited, and the work often requires specialized skills, narrowing the employment impact. In reality, most of these investments were already planned for strategic and technological reasons, with the tariff acting more as a political lever than the true catalyst.
John, these sound like bully tariffs. Auto, for example. Kiss the ring or face the tariff seems to be the message.
Yeah, bring a 24-karat gold plaque to the White House, or the tariff story could go on. And obviously that's a complicated story for companies and countries like Canada as well.
For Canada, the chip tariff was another reminder that Trump's trade pressure can target any sector. Prime Minister Mark Carney's response has been deliberate. Maintain the backbone of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, which still keeps about 85% of Canadian exports tariff-free while refusing to rush into any bad deal. Ottawa has rolled out a $1.2 billion Canadian dollars support package for industries already hit by the August 1st increase on non-customer goods, shielding sectors like softwood lumber from immediate damage. On technology, Canada is deepening partnerships outside the U.S. while staying embedded in North America's semiconductor supply chain. This dual track reduces risk if the U.S. imposes the full 100% chip tariff without broad exemptions. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has warned that Trump could move to reopen CUSMA early, but Canada's united stance has been to prepare, not panic. The strategy is to engage on favorable terms, not from a position of weakness.
Hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can, and that's what we need to do. And we can do it. We can build anything here in Canada, absolutely anything.
The 100% chip tariff is more than an economic measure. It's a negotiating tactic, a show of force, and a test of loyalty. but it also carries the risk of higher consumer prices, distorted investment incentives, and unresolved technological gaps. Trump has made himself the central actor in this drama, but Canada has not been cast as a passive player. Under Carney's watch, the country is protecting its industries, diversifying its alliances, and holding its ground in trade talks. The fight over chips is just one front in a broader contest of leverage. And in that contest, endurance, not speed, will decide who comes out ahead.
For decades, the United States has alternated between confrontation and collaboration, frequently applying unfounded, countervailing and anti-dumping duties against Canadian softwood. Let's be clear. Canada does not dump lumber into the United States.
When President Trump raised tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber to nearly 35% this August, he claimed Canada was dumping cheap wood into the U.S. market. But the numbers tell a deeper story. Nearly 70% of softwood lumber imported into the U.S. comes from Canada, a supply chain that's been built over decades to support everything from new home construction to disaster recovery in states like California. What Trump didn't say is that the U.S. logging industry isn't built to replace that supply. The country may have the trees but not the sawmills or the workforce. According to interviews on Fox Business with industry experts, it would take 5 to 10 years to scale up domestic milling capacity. And that's if federal regulations on forest access were loosened, which remains politically and legally uncertain.
The countervailing duties that are set to go up very soon, this ludicrous Section 232 investigation, and so we could be dealing with duties and tariffs combined well over 35%. I think Americans are going to be finding out very shortly the impact that these duties are going to be having on them.
The effects won't stay in spreadsheets. They're already hitting home, literally. Economists from sources like Investopedia project that rising lumber costs could push construction expenses up by 10 to 15%. In wildfire-prone areas like California, where rebuilding is urgent, that means families face higher prices, longer delays, and fewer options. And it's not just disaster zones. From suburbs in Texas to apartment projects in Illinois, developers are reconsidering timelines and budgets. Trump once promised to build more homes to address the housing crisis. But his tariff strategy may now be one of the very reasons why new housing becomes less affordable.
The forest industry is a pillar of the Canadian economy. Today, I'm announcing a series of new measures to help the softwood lumber industry pivot to a growing Canadian market and to the markets of reliable trading partners around the world.
In Ottawa, Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't lash out. Instead, he redirected. His government unveiled over $1 billion Canadian dollars in support for the softwood lumber industry, a package made up of loan guarantees, grants for product diversification, and workforce support. The largest portion, $700 million Canadian dollars, will be accessible even to small and medium-sized firms struggling with liquidity after 8 years of trade uncertainty. But Carney's move wasn't just financial, it was strategic. He tied the support directly to a new $25 billion federal homebuilding program launching this fall. Canadian lumber won't sit idle. It will be used to build affordable housing at home. The message is clear. If the U.S. won't take Canadian lumber under fair conditions, Canada will create its own demand.
Now, the U.S. could increase the amount that it imports from countries like Germany or Sweden in terms of just softwood, but they do not have enough to completely replace how much we get from Canada.
The U.S. may impose tariffs, but it can't easily walk away from Canadian lumber. Alternative suppliers like Sweden or Germany simply don't have enough capacity to fill the gap. Meanwhile, U.S. mills are already operating at full throttle, with no surge capacity to speak of. That's why Canada's calm response speaks volumes. Carney's team is shifting toward diversification, with new trade missions to Vietnam and Japan, and a renewed push to expand Canada's market reach. As BC Forestry Minister Ravi Parmar put it, the U.S. will soon feel the consequences, not just in trade figures, but in the real-world cost of wood, homes, and materials Americans rely on. What Trump framed as a hardline trade maneuver may turn into economic self-sabotage. Canadian lumber producers now have capital to survive, time to adapt, and political backing to pivot. Carney's government is even preparing workforce transition programs to support 6,000 workers. Not because the industry is collapsing, but because it's evolving. And as Canada pushes forward, the pressure is quietly building on Trump. Higher prices, frustrated developers, and mounting costs for U.S. consumers all point to the same reality. Canada didn't blink. It built. As Trump doubles down on tariffs, Canada is building resilience. And in this standoff, it's not always the loudest side that's winning. Sometimes, it's the side that simply keeps building.